There is a particular kind of silence that follows certain words. Not the kind that leaves room for apology. Not the kind that invites clarification or reconciliation. The kind that severs. The kind that crystallizes a truth you had been running from your entire life. My mother's voice had that quality the last time I stood in her kitchen. Professional failure. She said it the way someone might describe the weather. Casual. Final. As if it were already written into the fabric of reality. As if my entire existence could be summarized in 2 words and dismissed with the same energy one uses to throw out spoiled milk. I was 31 years old. I had spent the better part of a decade chasing something I couldn't name, moving between editorial internships that paid nothing, freelance gigs that evaporated the moment I started to believe in them, and creative projects that lived and died in the obscurity of my laptop. I had a degree from a good school. I had talent, or so I'd been told by people who didn't matter enough to change my circumstances. What I didn't have was the thing my mother valued above all else: visible, undeniable, monetizable success. She had built her world on appearances. Every dinner party, every carefully curated social media post, every calculated conversation at the country club was a brick in the fortress of her reputation. And I, her only daughter, had become the crack in the foundation. The thing she had to explain away. The disappointment she dressed up in euphemisms when her friends asked what I was doing with my life. Professional failure. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't slam doors or raise my voice. I simply looked at her, standing there in her spotless kitchen with her spotless life, and I understood that I had been working toward the wrong thing. I had been trying to earn her approval. I had been trying to become someone she could brag about. I had been building my life around the architecture of her expectations, and in that moment, I realized the foundation was poisoned. I left her house that day, and I didn't go back. What followed was not a montage of triumph. It was not a sudden burst of inspiration or a miraculous opportunity that fell into my lap. It was winter. Not the season, though that came too. I mean the internal kind. The kind where you stop performing for an audience that will never applaud. The kind where you strip away every layer of who you thought you were supposed to be and confront the raw, unadorned truth of what you actually want. I moved into a smaller apartment. I stopped answering calls from family members who wanted to know if I'd apologized yet, if I'd come to my senses, if I understood how much I was hurting my mother by being distant. I deleted social media. I stopped checking my email obsessively. I stopped measuring my worth by external validation and started asking a different question. What would I create if no one was watching? The answer came slowly. I had always written, but I had written with the ghost of judgment hovering over my shoulder. I had edited myself into blandness, smoothed every rough edge, removed every risk. Now, with nothing left to lose and no one left to impress, I wrote the truth. I wrote about mothers who weaponize love. I wrote about daughters who are raised to be trophies. I wrote about the particular violence of conditional affection. I wrote until my hands ached and my eyes blurred and the words on the screen stopped sounding like me and started sounding like something older, something truer. I sent the essay to one place, a publication I had admired for years but never dared to approach because I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't agonize over the submission. I didn't rewrite it 40 times. I simply sent it, and then I went back to living my small, quiet life. 3 weeks later, they accepted it. A month after that, it went viral. I don't use that word lightly. I don't mean it got some likes or a few shares. I mean it detonated. It was republished in 6 languages. It was read aloud on podcasts. It was discussed in think pieces and book clubs and university classrooms. People I had never met wrote to tell me I had articulated something they had felt their entire lives, but never had the language to express. Agents reached out. Editors reached out. Suddenly, The same publications that had ignored me for years wanted to know if I had more to say. I did. I wrote a book. Not because someone told me to, not because I thought it would fix anything, but because the silence I had cultivated in that winter phase had given me clarity. The book was a collection of essays about family, identity, and the lies we tell ourselves to survive the people who are supposed to love us. It was raw. It was unflinching. It was the kind of work you can only create when you've stopped caring whether people like you. The book sold at auction. The advance was more money than I had made in the previous 5 years combined. But that wasn't the moment that mattered. The moment that mattered came 6 months later, when my publisher called to tell me that Vogue wanted to do a feature. Not a small mention, a cover. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't call her to gloat or to prove anything. I simply continued living my life, which had become something I actually recognized. I had friends now who knew me as I actually was, not as a projection of someone else's expectations. I had work that mattered to me. I had silence that felt like peace instead of failure. The cover came out on a Tuesday. I didn't see it first. My mother did. I know this because my phone, which had been blissfully quiet for months, began to vibrate with a fury I hadn't experienced since I'd gone silent. Calls from my mother, calls from my aunt, calls from family friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Text messages that ranged from congratulatory to confused to accusatory. And then, finally, a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was different, tighter, higher. There was something in it I had never heard before, something that took me a moment to identify. Desperation. She wanted to know why I hadn't told her. She wanted to know why she had to find out from a friend who saw it at a newsstand. She wanted to know if I was intentionally trying to humiliate her, if I was punishing her, if I had written the book to hurt her. She wanted to have lunch. She wanted to talk. She wanted to fix this. I listened to the voicemail twice, not because I was considering a response, but because I wanted to hear it clearly. I wanted to understand the exact texture of the moment when someone realizes they have miscalculated entirely. She had spent my whole life teaching me that my value was contingent on her approval. She had built a dynamic where I was always reaching, always proving, always failing to meet an impossible standard. And now, in the absence of my need for her validation, she had discovered something uncomfortable. She had no power over me anymore. I didn't call her back. I didn't write a scathing message or a carefully worded boundary. I simply continued the silence I had started the day I walked out of her kitchen. Because the truth, the one I had learned in that long winter, was that some people don't deserve access to your transformation. Some people only want to be part of your life when it reflects well on them. And the most devastating thing you can do to someone who has built their identity on controlling you is to become uncontrollable. The interview in Vogue was everything I wanted it to be. The journalist asked smart questions. I talked about the book, about the process of unlearning shame, about the specific kind of courage it takes to disappoint the people who raised you. I didn't mention my mother by name, but anyone who knew us would recognize the shape of the story. The photos were striking. I looked like myself, not a polished, media-trained version, not someone performing confidence. Just myself, standing in good light, wearing clothes I actually liked, holding the book I had written when I stopped trying to be anyone else. The feature ran 8 pages. My mother's friends saw it, her book club saw it, the women at the country club saw it, and every single one of them would have asked her about it, would have congratulated her, would have assumed she was so proud. I imagine her smiling through those conversations. I imagine her pretending she knew. I imagine her going home and rereading the interview, looking for some mention of her, some acknowledgement, some proof that I still thought about her at all. She wouldn't have found it, because the most complete form of revenge is not confrontation. It's not a dramatic speech or a public call-out. It's building a life so full, so aligned with who you actually are, that the person who tried to diminish you becomes irrelevant. It's succeeding on terms they never understood, in ways they never valued, until the moment the world validates you and they realize they were wrong. I didn't need to tell my mother she had failed me. The cover did that. I didn't need to prove I wasn't a failure. The work did that. I didn't need her to apologize or to understand or to change. I just needed to stop letting her definition of success dictate my life. The book became a bestseller. I went on tour. I spoke at events. I built a career on the foundation of the silence she had tried to use as a weapon. And every time someone asked me about my family, I smiled and said something polite and vague and moved on. Because the story I was telling now wasn't about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough by someone who didn't have the vision to see what they could become. My mother still calls sometimes. I don't answer, not out of cruelty, but out of preservation, because I know what she wants. She wants back in. She wants to be part of the narrative now that it's worth being part of. She wants to be the proud mother, the supportive figure, the woman who always believed in me. But belief is not retroactive. Support is not something you can claim after the fact. And I will not give her the satisfaction of rewriting history. The Vogue cover is framed in my apartment, not prominently, just on a shelf between books where I see it when I'm working. It's a reminder, not of success, though it represents that, but of the moment I stopped waiting for permission to exist. The moment I stopped shrinking to fit someone else's vision. The moment I chose the long, cold winter of transformation over the warm, familiar prison of approval. Professional failure, she called me. She was right, in a way. I did fail. I failed to become the daughter she wanted. I failed to live the life she had imagined for me. I failed to stay small and quiet and grateful for the crumbs of her conditional love. And in that failure, I found everything that mattered.